haven't spoken to the Secretary today, and we've been clear, the House and Senate Democrats have been clear. This is not, and I told the member, this is not CARES 2. This is not about putting everything in there that you want. It's about what is timely at the moment, responding to the Secretary's request for $250 billion in 48 hours. Really? No, we need more data, and we need more oversight in terms of how this works and how we can make it.
That was House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She was on a call with reporters discussing the latest congressional squabble over coronavirus funding. The current measure involves around $250 billion adding to the Paycheck Protection Program, which Senate Democrats blocked yesterday.
The Hill senior correspondent Mike Lillis reported on the call, including why Democrats are holding up the additional funds and the future of potential remote voting on the Hill. He joins us now via Skype for more. Good to see you, Mike.
Good to see you guys. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Just kind of bring us up to speed with where we are in these negotiations. What are the sticking points? What are Democrats fighting for?
Well, you know, both the House and the Senate, of course, are not here, and so it complicates these negotiations when they can't sit down face to face. But the gist of it is there's kind of a two-track debate right now. They just passed this $2 trillion bill, and Pelosi and the Democrats are charging forward with something else that's going to be probably more than $1 trillion on top of that. That's going to be for more direct payments and more unemployment insurance and more money for hospitals and equipment and all these other things. In the meantime, they're working on what is called the interim bill, and this is the $250 billion just for the small business loan program, which has proven very popular, and the money is going out the door very quickly. And that's what came to the floor yesterday. Steven Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary, and Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, want to move that very quickly, and they tried yesterday. The Democrats say, we support the extra $250, but wait a minute, we have some conditions here. And their conditions really are not the size of the funding, not the $250 billion, but how it is delivered and where it goes. And so the conditions they want on there is just, we don't want all the big banks to be the ones delivering these loans. We want to also make sure that underserved communities, more marginalized businesses, women-owned, farmers, rural communities, native tribe-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses are also partaking of these loans. And we're hearing from a lot of those small businesses. I talked to some of those groups just this week, and they're applying and they're getting no traction at all. They're kind of at the end of the line, and so the help might be coming, but it's not coming fast enough. So Pelosi says, "Wait a minute, we need these conditions if you want the $250."
Wow. I've heard those same objections from the small business community, Mike. I think some of the counters on that is that adding more means testing and administration is just what is holding it up in the first place. Can you just tell us the status of that larger package that's beginning to come together? Because there's very little insight right now between the negotiations on the right and the left. You said $1 trillion payment or $1 trillion bill taking shape on the left. We've heard some new proposals on the right, but nothing really coming together there. What's the status maybe of that negotiation, or is it just really nascent right now?
It's really nascent, and right now it seems to be just the Democrats who are pushing for it. Just yesterday we heard from Roy Blunt, we heard from John Cornyn, Mitch McConnell. They're saying that a lot of this money for hospitals, for the supplies, for the unemployment insurance that was in that $2 trillion bill is not out the door just yet. So how can we gauge the need going forward? Pelosi saying we already can gauge the need going forward, and that's why we're going to start working on this thing. So right now the negotiation is just with Pelosi and the House Democrats. And they're the ones who are really putting this thing together. They, of course, thought that they got jammed in the last bill because this originated in the Senate. It was, Mnuchin, it was McConnell, it was Charles Schumer who kind of negotiated it, and the House Democrats were forced to swallow it. So they don't want that to happen again. Pelosi's been on these conference calls with her caucus every day of the week, and she's getting a lot of pressure to be on the front lines of the next big package. And so that's why you're hearing from her that we're going to start it in the House this time. It's not going to start in the Senate.
I like how you called him Charles Schumer. I think I might adopt that. Yeah. Who is influential, though, in terms of the House Democrats that are crafting this potential next relief package? Whose voices are at the table that Pelosi and others are actually listening to?
That's a great question. It's a lot of the committee heads. This is the House, so everything goes through Nancy Pelosi. she is delegating the authority to the committee heads, but ultimately it's going to be her choice. But so you're hearing a lot from Ways and Means Chairman Richard Neal from Massachusetts. You're hearing a lot from Frank Pallone, Chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee from New Jersey. You're hearing a lot from Bobby Scott. He's Labor and Education from Virginia. And those are the guys who are going to have the biggest sway in all of this. Nydia Velázquez is Small Business Committee Chairwoman from New York. And she's been involved, of course, because of all the small business loans. So it's coming up from the committees, but on these conference calls, there's been 180, 200, 210 members. They all want to talk. They all have their concerns individual to their districts, and these calls have been going on for hours and hours at a time, and they all want to have a say. So everybody is kind of submitting their requests to the committee heads. The committee heads are talking to Pelosi. And through all of this mess, they hope to come up with some bill. We just don't know when it's going to come out.
Mike, the president tweeted today about adding infrastructure into that. Is that something that is getting any traction on the right or the left in the Congress right now?
Certainly on the left and also on the right. Richard Shelby, the Appropriations Chairman in the Senate, has been pushing for infrastructure for a very long time. The trouble seems to be that it's just not money that goes out the door immediately. And this is an immediate crisis kind of situation. And so you saw this in the last package. After the $2 trillion was passed, Pelosi said, okay, that was the mitigation phase. Now we move to the recovery phase, and that's going to be a huge infrastructure bill. Then remember last week when the 6.8 million people applied for unemployment claims, and they really had to pivot, and she said, okay, we are not in the recovery mode. We're still in the triage mode, and that's when they started talking about something a little bit different. So, yes, they're talking about infrastructure. They're talking about, even in the short term, they're talking about things like rural broadband as these kids are, forced to stay at home with these school closures. Can they avail of an education if they can't get online? Telemedicine, telehealth, all of that is kind of coming to the forefront because of this crisis. So there's sort of short-term pieces of an infrastructure bill that might make their way into some of these more immediate bills. But in terms of a long-term big infrastructure bill like Trump wants, like Pelosi and Shelby eventually want, I don't know that you're going to see that happen in weeks, certainly not in weeks. But as the months crawl forward toward November, it's one of those, everybody wins situations because everybody has bridges, roads, airports in their districts, and so everybody has always wanted infrastructure. It's just an issue of how to pay for it. Yeah. Now in this emergency situation, they're not really worried about deficit spending right now, so yes. It might be an opportunity.
Suddenly all those how do you pay for it thing, that kind of went out the window. What about something we've been following here on this show, which is that Senator Josh Hawley and Bernie Sanders, sort of a right populist and a left populist, have been looking at emulating countries like Denmark that rather than having people collect through unemployment insurance, have been backing up payroll so that people can stay attached to their jobs and just basically pay the payroll of these small businesses instead. Is there any broader spread energy around those sorts of proposals?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one of those strange bedfellow situations where you get very liberal Democrats, very conservative Republicans who suddenly agree on something. You mentioned Sanders, Hawley, also Pramila Jayapal, she's the head of the Progressive Caucus in the House, is pushing a very similar thing. And the idea is, you prevent people from losing their jobs, you prevent people from going on the unemployment rolls and clogging that system by just providing a direct payment through the federal government to the businesses to allow people to keep these employees on their payroll. It's not dissimilar to what we've seen now with the Paycheck Protection Program, which is the $250 billion that they had wanted to pass yesterday. But that just goes through the banks, and this seems like it would go directly to the businesses. So you sort of cut out the middleman. I don't know that there's a lot of traction for that. McConnell has not talked about it. Haven't heard Schumer talk about it, or even Nancy Pelosi. So I'm not sure that that's on the leadership level right now, but it is getting a lot of headlines, and it is an idea that's floating around there. We'll just have to see if it gets incorporated into any of all of this.
Certainly interesting, Mike. Thank you for keeping us updated. Stay safe.
Yeah, great reporting. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You guys too. Appreciate it.
Next on Rising, establishment Democrats hope your blind hatred of Trump will make you pull the lever and vote for Biden no matter what. Nathan Robinson, he joins us to weigh in on that pitch when Rising continues.